Hello, this is Anita Belle, the Motown Belle, coming to you live from Detroit, Michigan. Yes, today's date is August 13, 2013, and Detroit has declared bankruptcy. Some of you might be wondering, how do I feel about Detroit's bankruptcy? Well, I want to set the record straight. Everyone wants to know who to blame, who to blame. Of course, I have my opinion on who to blame. The story that is being advanced that the reason for Detroit's bankruptcy is because of corrupt politicians. And so the corruption of Detroit's former mayor, Kwame Kilpatrick, that received international attention, and showing the Detroit mayor in handcuffs and jail attire. All of that was the vision of why Detroit is bankrupt. But I call that a diversion. First of all, corruption is bad. And political corruption, or the corruption of politicians, is very bad. I don't want to minimize that at all. But I also want to be fair and say, let's enforce integrity in government across the board to everybody that is doing it, not just black, not just Democrat, and not just in Wayne County, Michigan, in Detroit. What do I mean? I have been saying for the past 2 or 3 years that the sheriff of Oakland County, Michael Bouchard, has been taking a contract, giving it to his buddies, not having that contract ratified by the Oakland County Board of Commissioners. It was supposed to be ratified by the Board of Commissioners because it was a contract that involved conflict of interest of a public employee, because the buddy he gave it to was one of his sheriff deputies. I've been saying this for years. And some people have the attitude, well, everybody does it. And so they don't go after Michael Bouchard. There has been perjury in that case. No one's gone after him and put him in a jail cell next to, and this perjurer, I would say, would be Thomas Rabette, the deputy who was also an attorney who should know better. All of this is going on, and is he in a jail cell next to Kwame Kilpatrick? No, no, because there are different rules when you're white, when you're Republican, and when you're not in Wayne County, which is the county where Detroit is the county seat. There are different rules for the rest of Michigan than there are for Detroit. But be that as it may, there are different rules for Democrats than there are for Republicans. There's different rules for men than there are for women. I can go on and on. Different rules for whites than there are for blacks. Goodness, separate and unequal is still alive and well. And part of the history of why separate and unequal is still alive and well in Detroit goes back farther than 40 years. And the reason I bring up 40 years is because 40 years ago, Detroit elected its first black mayor. Well, now we're going to try and say that the politics in Detroit have been horrible and corrupt or incompetent for the last 40 years. And that's another racial stereotype that, if you didn't know the history, then you'd say 40 years. What happened 40 years ago? Yes, Coleman A. Young was elected mayor. But how did Coleman A. Young get elected mayor? By then, the majority population of Detroit was black. What caused the majority population in Detroit to become black? There were white people living here in the 1950s and 1940s. But between the 1950s and 1973, when Coleman Young was elected, there was a case called Brown versus Board of Education that happened in Topeka, Kansas. And in that case, it was struck down that separate and unequal, or separate is unequal, and therefore if blacks are supposed to have equal rights, then by golly, we have to integrate the school systems. Well, lawsuits went through the South, went through other parts of the United States, but as it got into Michigan, then they said, all right, there was a lawsuit to desegregate Detroit's public schools. That lawsuit stayed in court long enough for the white people to say, well, if you're going to desegregate Detroit's public schools, then we know how to keep our children from becoming integrated. We'll just move out of Detroit. That's what happened. And you still see that very strict racial divide in the city suburb dynamic, where Detroit is the chocolate city. Many of the suburbs are vanilla suburbs. Sometimes to mitigate that racial divide, you have some suburbs that have become more integrated, which means that they have now white people moving farther and farther into the suburbs, so that you have a singer like Eminem who said that many white people have never been south of 10 Mile Road. Even though 8 Mile Road is the boundary for Detroit, they figured that 2 mile buffer zone for all of the suburbs that immediately border Detroit, that's where some of the blacks immediately moved to. And so they left that 2 mile buffer, and so they now have moved farther and farther out. They're at 10 mile, 11 mile, 12 mile, or way 23 Mile Road. They're just making sure that they're far enough away that their children don't have to be sitting in a desk next to a black child. All right, that's what happened. And from that type of racial segregation, you have to add what happened in the 2000s or the late 1990s. In the late 1990s, you have the liar loans happen with the mortgage companies, so that the real culprit for Detroit's bankruptcy has to go back to the banks. The banks were loaning money to Tweety, Fido, Fluffy, whoever, so that you have some identity theft going on. You presented a social security number even for people who were dead. They would loan you money. Fine. They loaned you money, didn't investigate, didn't ask for much of an ID. There was all kind of lies going on. You could say the liars broke the banks. Huh, really? No, the banks didn't even care, because they were selling those mortgages over and over again. Knew they were bad mortgages, And while they were selling those mortgages, they figured, well, the property is securing the mortgage, the property value is going up and up and up. So even if Fido doesn't pay the mortgage, as you don't expect Fido has much of a paycheck, then still that mortgage is secured by the house. So if the mortgage ever becomes in default, then we just take the house away from Fido the dog. Okay, fine. Fido doesn't have a dog house anymore. Usually you sell the house again. But why would the bank stop doing this? Since it was a great money train, what caused them to get off the money train? And as I explained in some earlier videos, the money train stopped when in the early 2000s they realized, uh-oh, we're looking at a solar maximum that has a 1 in 8 chance of producing a solar superstorm before the year 2020. So a 12% chance of a solar superstorm before 2020. What does that mean? That means the lights can go out. Oh my goodness. How does the lights going out or a solar superstorm affect the economy? It puts the gravy train at a stop. A stop. Because you need electricity to transfer money. You need electricity to do stock market transactions. You need electricity for the internet, for all of these various things, for direct deposit, for email, for goodness sake. Because let's be real, why is the post office in such trouble? Because everybody's not putting a stamp on it waiting 2 or 3 days. Everybody's not even waiting until the next day for express mail. They're just going ahead and sending it instantaneously. Now the post office can compete with the next 5 minutes. So there you go. But if you have no electricity for even email, then you have the economy coming to a grinding halt. And when that happens and money becomes worthless, because you have the cash in your pocket. Let's say that there's a blackout. You have the cash in your pocket, but now you need to go get more. You spent all of that, and now you need to go get more. Well, you go to the bank. I want more. How are you going to make a withdrawal if your automatic deposit hasn't come in, if your Social Security hasn't come in, if your disability hasn't come in, if all of these things are affected by a blackout, but you still have your property? That makes you richer than the bank at that point, because the bank would run out of money. There'd be a run on the bank, and the money would be worthless. So they decided, well, we want the property, and we'll do this before the solar storms come. And so you see massive foreclosures. Massive. And that's what happened in Detroit. Entire blocks. I could drive down a block and see 7 houses in a row foreclosed on. And how do I know they're foreclosed on? Once you move the people out, then there's going to be vandalism that happens where the copper piping is stolen, and they sell the metal, and they take out the water heater, and they take out the furnace, and don't let there be air conditioning. All of that is gone. All of that is gone. Any leftover appliances, gone. The aluminum siding stolen off the side of the house. And then the banks didn't do anything. They didn't secure the house very well. It looks like an eyesore. Nobody's mowing the lawn. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out the house is empty. And so the house goes into disarray. Looks awful, and nobody buys it. You have houses in Detroit, and I kid you not, they are on sale for $1. $1. And nobody will buy it. Not even for $1. That's deep. A bank owned that house. But what did the bank do after they owned that house that they can't even sell for $1? They not only let the grass grow and the property get vandalized, but they also did not pay the property taxes. And that happened to thousands of properties in Detroit. And you wonder why the city is bankrupt? My goodness. Kwame Kilpatrick giving a contract to his buddy Bobby Ferguson, and $1 million here, $2 million there. That wouldn't bankrupt the city. When the city is $18 billion in debt, that means somebody didn't pay some taxes. And I'm saying it's the banks. Since they took back the houses, they got a bailout from the federal government saying we need $700 billion. Did they take that money and pay any of the taxes? Not enough, obviously. So that is what happened to Detroit. And why isn't anyone telling that story? Because it's more popular. Well, there's a racism reason too. It's more popular to blame it on the black politicians and on public corruption and on that stereotype that blacks are too corrupt, too stupid, too lazy, too incompetent to govern themselves. You even have the Detroit emergency manager, who happens to be a black man, voicing this same racist garbage. And where does it come from? It comes from Genesis. Let's go back to the beginning. It comes from Genesis. In Genesis, there is a curse by Noah upon one of his sons. He said, "Cursed be Canaan. A servant of servants shall you be." And ever since Canaan got cursed, somebody decided to extend it to the whole children of Ham. Even though Ham had more than one son, and the genealogy of Ham and the genealogy of Shem and the genealogy of Japheth is all recorded in Genesis chapter 10. But in chapter 9, there was that curse. A servant of servants shall you be. So someone decided that the children of Ham shall be cursed with perpetual servitude. And their brothers shall rule over them. So that is why there is this racist paternalism that we need somebody to rule over us because we're incapable of ruling over ourselves. Now, if you believe that, if you accept that, then that also explains why Africans never got an apology for slavery. And the book, Revealing Mistaken Identities, goes into the history of not all of the people on those slave ships were descendants of Ham, even though they were black. Oh, that's deep right there. And I will stop right there because it's already at 15 minutes, but that's deep right there. Some of the people on those slave ships, including my family, were actually descendants of Shem through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Oh yeah, I'm saying it. I'm saying I'm a black Jew. Oh, and I'm not talking about I just converted. Although I had to go learn Judaism because when my people were snatched up, we were taught Christianity because we were saved. We were saved from the savagery of Africa. Those savage customs we were practicing were called circumcision. Those savage customs we were practicing was called Judaism. But that's another video. I just wanted to explain what was going on with the Detroit bankruptcy, my 2 cents for whatever it's worth. And if you want to read more about the black Jews and how they were brought over on a slave ship, I can prove it through DNA and history. I can prove it through my DNA and my family's history. But you can read it on Revealing Mistaken Identities. You can find the link to the ebook on afrosci.com. Thank you, and God bless you.